Everyone thinks this is just a bad phase for Max Verstappen, a slower car, a few bad races, a team trying to catch up. But that's not the real story because right now something doesn't add up. Verstappen says the car feels better, Red Bull says the upgrades are working. The data shows small gains, and yet the results keep getting worse. So, what's actually going on here? Because if the performance is improving, why does it feel like everything is falling apart? Here's what nobody is saying: this is not about pace. It's not even about competition. This is about something much deeper. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because this isn't just a story about one driver struggling. This might be the moment where the entire balance of Formula One starts to shift. And the scariest part is it's happening in plain sight. So let's slow this down. On the surface, this looks simple: new regulations, new car behavior, new problems. That's the explanation most people are comfortable with. And to be fair, it makes sense. The 2026 regulation shift has changed everything. Energy management is more aggressive, car balance is harder to control, drivers are adapting to a completely different style of racing. Even Verstappen himself has hinted at this. He's talked about how the car feels different, how extracting performance is more complicated, how it's not as natural as before. So naturally, the conclusion is obvious. Red Bull is just going through a transition. They dominated before, now they're adjusting, and eventually they'll figure it out, right? But here's the problem: that explanation only works if the trajectory makes sense. And right now, it doesn't. Take Miami as an example. The upgrades were supposed to close the gap. Verstappen said the car felt more predictable. And yet, he still wasn't fighting for the win. So, what does that mean? If the car is improving, why isn't the outcome changing? And this is where things start to get uncomfortable because maybe this isn't a phase Red Bull can simply solve. Maybe the problem isn't what everyone thinks it is. And if that's true, it's the beginning of something much bigger. If you're starting to feel like something is off, stay with this. Because the deeper you look, so this is where the story starts to break. Because if this was just a performance issue, the pattern would be obvious: bad car, bad results, but that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing something much stranger. Let's start with the first crack. Verstappen himself, after Miami, he didn't sound angry, he didn't sound frustrated, he sounded distant. That matters because this is the same driver who used to call out problems instantly. Sharp, direct, unfiltered. Now the tone is different, more controlled, more neutral, almost like he already knows something and doesn't need to say it out loud. So, what does that mean? Because drivers don't just change like that, not without a reason. And then there's the second crack: the gap, not just in one race, not just in one weekend, but consistently. Red Bull brings upgrades, the car gets better, dot, quote, quote. But the gap doesn't disappear, it stays. Sometimes it even gets worse, so now you have a contradiction. Improvement without outcome, and that's a problem because in Formula One, progress always shows up somewhere. Lap time, race pace, strategy, flexibility, but here it's not translating. So where's it going? And then comes the third crack: execution. This used to be Red Bull's biggest strength: perfect calls, clean weekends, relentless pressure. Now, small mistakes, missed opportunities, moments where they just don't look sharp, not catastrophic, but noticeable. And when you combine all of this, because this doesn't look like a team that's temporarily behind, this looks like a team that's losing something it used to rely on. And once that starts happening, so here's the question: what if the problem isn't the car? What if it's not the upgrades? What if it's not even the competition? What if the real issue is the entire system around Verstappen is no longer built for him? Because this is where everything changes. This is not about Verstappen struggling. It is not that he suddenly forgot how to extract performance. It is not that Red Bull just needs more time. It is something much bigger than that. This is about alignment, or more precisely, the loss of it. For years, Red Bull built a system around one idea: Max Verstappen at the center, car philosophy designed for his style, team structure built around his feedback, decision making optimized for his strengths. Everything pointed in one direction, and it worked. Dominance wasn't an accident, it was alignment, perfect alignment. But now, that alignment is breaking. The new regulations demand a different kind of car, a different kind of balance, a different way of managing performance. And suddenly, think about it like this: you don't suddenly become slower, but if the tool you're using stops fitting your strengths, not because you changed, but because the system did. And that's exactly what this looks like. Verstappen isn't declining, the system around him is drifting away from what made him unbeatable. And here's the part nobody wants to say: that's much harder to fix than a slow car, because you can upgrade a car, but you can't easily rebuild an entire philosophy mid-season. You can't instantly realign a team. And you definitely can't do it while your rivals are moving faster than you. So if you see it this way, and if you disagree with that, because once you accept that possibility, and that's where things get even more uncomfortable, because once you accept that this is a structural problem, not with opinions, not with reactions, with patterns. So let's look at the evidence. Start with the most obvious shift, race dynamics. Before, Max Verstappen could control a race from the front or carve through the field with predictable pace. Now, even when the car is better, he can't dictate the race in the same way. The energy management window is tighter, the overtakes are more situational, the rhythm is broken. That's not just a performance issue, that's a different game. And when the game changes, the system that once gave you control can become a limitation. Look at Miami again. The upgrade improved stability. The feedback was positive, but the race still slipped away. Not because of one mistake, not because of one bad lap, because over an entire stint, the control wasn't there. So, what does that tell you? It tells you the gains are local. But the losses are systemic. Now, compare that to Mercedes. Not just faster, more stable, more repeatable, more predictable across conditions. That's a system advantage. And in Formula One, system advantage beats raw talent over time. Every time. Here's another piece of proof driver behavior. When drivers trust the system, they push, they take risks. They lean on the car. When they don't, they adapt, they manage, they protect. And that's exactly what Verstappen is doing right now. Not attacking the limit, managing it. That's not dominance. That's containment. And that shift alone tells you everything. Because a dominant driver doesn't suddenly become cautious unless the system forces him to. But it gets deeper. Listen to the language, not what is said, but how it's said. Short answers, neutral tone, no escalation. That's not frustration, that's disengagement. And when a driver reaches that point, they no longer believe the situation is fixable in the short term. So now connect all of this. Race control is gone. System alignment is breaking. Driver behavior is shifting. This is not random. This is a pattern. And that pattern leads to one uncomfortable conclusion. The problem isn't just inside Red Bull, it's inside Formula One itself. Because the 2026 direction is pushing the sport towards something different. More controlled racing, more energy management, less raw expression, and for a driver like Verstappen, because his advantage was never just speed, it was control. The ability to feel the car, to push beyond the edge, to dominate through instinct, and now that edge is being flattened. So this isn't just about one team falling behind. It's about the sport evolving away from what made him dominant. And here's the real implication. If the system doesn't reward what makes you special, that's the question nobody wants to answer because it leads to a scenario that still feels impossible. What if the biggest risk to Formula One, but losing the driver who defined it? So where does that leave Verstappen? Not in a collapse, not in a decline, but in a position he's never really been in before, out of alignment. And when that happens, you change the system or you leave it. And right now, so the next time you hear that this is just a rough patch, if everything's improving, because if that question doesn't have a clear answer, and the next chapter might be the one that changes everything.